Hey there, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ben Mosier, and I thought it would be a good time to do a little bit of a reintroduction video. It's been a while since I've been making public content on Wardley Mapping, and so I want to get back into it, and part of the thing that I'm going to try is making a little bit of a daily kind of diary, at least for the next week. I'm going to test it, of what it is that I'm doing, what I'm thinking about, the tests I'm running, and all that, and we'll get more into that in a moment. But first, a little bit of a story, a little bit of a history. So I run a business called Hired Thought, and it is responsible for websites like learnwardleymapping.com. And obviously I'm centered on Wardley Mapping, but I like other frameworks too. I like to play with other things. I'm not just interested in Wardley Mapping. So I've branched out a little bit. But the other thing that I've done with Hired Thought is I've built Wardley Mapping courses, so online courses, the purpose of which is to help people get from their first encounter of Wardley Mapping, which is often trying and failing to read the book, into more of, hey, I've at least made one map, and I at least have a general idea of like how this thing is supposed to work. So the course is really about like getting them over that first hump and getting them onto the path of continuous practice, getting better at it, and so on. I used to be really active on Twitter, and that was before it got taken over, and I've kind of just on principle not participated there as much, so I've lost touch with a lot of the folks that I used to hang out with on there. So if that's you, I miss you, and this is a way of trying to get back in touch with you a little bit. I started out in my career as a systems administrator, so I was actually working for the state of Pennsylvania in the United States, and my job was to help. I was in a public university running computer systems for both students on campus, making sure the apps worked and all that kind of stuff, making portals, things like that for student services, and also for the library system. All the state schools in Pennsylvania joined a consortium, and our public school was responsible for running the hub for all of those library services. There was some collective bargaining going on there with vendors, and we would run the vendor services. We would provide common services for all the different libraries. So that was part of like 50-50 split between those two different areas, student stuff and library stuff. And my actual day-to-day work was like monitoring systems and testing out new services and writing, I was one of the first folks there to start playing with infrastructure as code. And so like we had like 70 or so like individual virtual machines that we were managing. But long story short, I kind of like started realizing that the more interesting part of the work is actually not in the technical systems, not in the technical details, but in the people, in the interpersonal dynamics, in the social dynamics, in the organizational power dynamics. That's where the change actually happened. It wasn't fiddling with code or writing bash scripts or whatever. It was actually in the discussions in the meetings and the agreements and the things we'll try together and stuff like that. So that was kind of the start of my journey, and right around there, I first encountered the DevOps movement. I started getting into the theory of constraints, which originates from the 1984 book The Goal by Eliyahu M. Goldratt. And I sort of wandered into the Phoenix project, which is kind of like a modern rewrite for an IT context. And started going to conferences around DevOps. And again, DevOps, if you don't only think of DevOps as like infrastructure or tech, it was also a social movement. It was about having conversations. It was about the social side of change. So very much like my inspirations there for thinking about that a bit. After that point, I wrapped up my stint at the state, and I worked in a corporation for a couple of years. And it was like big, like we're talking enterprise organization, and I did more DevOps-y things there. And again, the theme that kept coming up was that, look, we have technical problems, but they are largely socially situated. So I may have something that looks like fiddling with code or making little websites or making sure the builds run or dealing with continuous integration or continuous delivery problems. But in fact, what we had were problems around silos in the organization, lots of problematic handoffs, people doing things that just didn't make sense anymore, like vestigial processes that nobody could explain, but it was creating a lot of work, and people were missing time with their families on weekends and things like that because they had to do these strange processes. And so like investigating those was a lot of like what I did. And I started taking on like these really big problems, like disaster recovery for an entire product line. And I was doing this with a partner, my mentor at the time, and we really were struggling with the social part of the organization, the power dynamics, the do what I say because I tell you what to do kind of things. And that led me actually to do the Wardley mapping stuff for the first time, because I had these big, messy problems, and I didn't know how to get a handle on them. And I'd sort of heard about Wardley mapping on Twitter. I'd seen some of Simon Wardley's tweets, and my mentor at the time like pushed me towards it and was like, there might be something here. And his name's Anthony. He was like really into like reading old papers and getting into the origins of a thing. So I kind of picked up that streak a little bit and started reading about Wardley Maps. And we ended up like locking ourselves into a conference room for a couple weeks to sort out this like disaster recovery problem, which in short means if something big breaks, or if like, let's say the office that we were working in got wiped off the map, what would we do? How would we recover and make sure that the customers that we were serving, who were dealing with life critical systems, how would we make sure that they could continue doing the work that they were doing? Wardley Maps seemed really helpful for that. And so we figured it out eventually. It took us a while. We spent quite a few weeks actually trying to make sense of the method itself and then how to use the method in our situation. But we did eventually make a map. And the map that we made helped us make some really hard decisions. So fast forward a little bit, I kind of burned out of the corporate environment. I sort of had like a purpose deficit. People asking you to do things that didn't actually make sense. The system was unintentional. It didn't help that there were like agile stand-ups happening outside of my cubicle, and I find it really, really hard and distracting. And I found myself having to like take walks around the building like every day in order to manage my anxiety. And it was just this constant pressure of this feeling of being crushed because of an unintentional system. Good people that were doing their best, but the unintention in the system was just really hard for me to deal with. So I got some advice. I got strong advice to actually quit. And so I did. And I put all my efforts into a small kind of startup thing, like doing some MVP software development as a service. And that was interesting, and we did a lot of interesting things for a while there. But then that kind of fizzled out, and I was left with the question, well, what should I do now? And obviously I tried to get another job because I was like, well, I guess I'll just get back into it. But I just wasn't interested in the tech anymore. And so this kind of arc completed a little bit where I was no longer interested in the technology stuff. I still fiddle. I still like make little websites. I still NPM install stuff every once in a while, right? Used to play with Docker containers, things like that. I can still do that. But I don't really do that for my main interest anymore. And it's like the social dynamics, the organizational dynamics, the process of taking unintentional systems and turning them into intentional systems over a period of time is what I'm interested in, is what I want to help people do. So I tried really hard to actually do the job thing, like try to find jobs, but nothing really fit because I had this like generalist profile, some tech background, but really interested in the social systems. And like I would write cover letters and no one would respond to them. And I just found that really frustrating. So I went on Twitter and I started announcing my intentions to do the kind of work that I wanted to do, like around these social kind of dynamics in organizations. I eventually managed to talk to some folks who I was really following on Twitter, really fascinated by what they do, what they were doing at the time. Ended up being Joshua Bloom, Jabe, as some of you know him, and Kevin Bear, who wrote the Phoenix Project, which was kind of back, going back to that a little bit. And they found a place for me. They invited me to come out to do some consulting work with them for a week. Hey, like come out, try this. If you like it, you can stick around and do some more kind kind of stuff. And that ended up being like my whole world for like a year or two, just like working with clients on real problems, solving nasty, like difficult social dynamics, organizational like problems, other consulting firms doing weird things, like all kinds of stuff like that. And it was amazing. And it was very, very hard. And I learned so much. And then I came out of that and was like, well, what do I do now? And I still had this kind of basis in Wardley Mapping. And that was a thing that I've been doing for quite a while. I had built the website. LearnWardleyMapping.com sort of became this de facto thing that people reference. Simon is not associated with the site, but he certainly points people there on occasion. And lots of folks have started embedding it into like their presentations and stuff like that, which I didn't expect. But now here I am, kind of coming out of that consulting world going, okay, what do I do now? Well, I should probably keep doing this Wardley Mapping thing. That's when I developed courses and things like that. So to wrap up the story, I ended up centering myself on Wardley Maps. And it's not even that I love Wardley Maps so much that I can't like imagine doing anything else. It's that I know a lot about it. And I've gone through the hard journey of going from not knowing anything about it to trying to like read the book and get sort of information that way, and then actually applying it in a hard, like real world situation. And then like going on to like continue practicing it over a series of years. I think at this point, it's definitely been at least 8 years, probably more, that I've been using Wardley Maps in anger, so to speak, like on real problems. So I have a lot to offer just in terms of practical, like don't overthink it, just do this. I found a lot of tools and processes and questions that are useful to ask. And so I really need to get that stuff out of my head. And so I'm still here and I'm still continuing to sort of like do that kind of work. One plot point that I left out is that sort of in the middle of my Wardley arc, so to speak, I got invited by Charles Burdett at PipDex to write this thing called Strategy Tactics. And at the time, I just didn't feel capable of doing it on my own. And I'd been working with David Hall, who's my partner in this sort of like work these days. I've been doing a lot of like Wardley mapping stuff with him specifically, and he's got a brilliant mind of his own, does a lot of thinking about strategy, has been really getting into Richard Ramelt lately, and we make a really great team. And so I said, hey, do you want to write this with me? And he said yes. And so we spent basically a year and a half writing this thing, getting it out into the world. It's called Strategy Tactics. You can get it at getstrategytactics.com. And so we wrote this thing, and it's just been such a monumental effort. We've come to the end of it, and now we do have some things we're continuing to do, like engaging with the people who work with the PIP deck, gathering testimonials, things like that. But we're largely left with the question, like, well, what do we do now? I think that I want to get back into Wardley mapping and creating content around there. I think I want to do workshops. I think I want to do more course creation, things like that. So part of the point of this reintroduction and this long story, which, you know, good on you if you're sticking around with me for this, is that I want to sort of reestablish what it is that I'm doing and document a little bit of the process of what it's like to start this business over, to start these efforts over, and to really be intentional about it. So you might be asking, like, well, what kind of stuff are we going to talk about? Well, at least for the next week, I'm going to do this test, documenting the process, the work every day. Maybe it'll turn into a weekly thing after that. I don't know. We'll see. But I'll talk about like my author responsibilities. So the things that David and I are doing as co-authors for the PIP deck to engage with that community and help them think about strategy. I mean, the PIP deck covers Wardley mapping. It also covers some transition designy concepts that we borrowed from Jabe Bloom, with permission, actually. So we try to make some of that material available to the world through this deck. And if you want to follow along as we like run tests around what kind of offers to be making, the really sticky, messy problem of Wardley mapping as its own like concept, right? Like this own thing that people understand or don't understand, that people are able to position in their minds or are not able to position in their minds. And what tests we run around that positioning, what tests we run around offers that we make, the results of those tests. I've got a couple that I can go over even right now. So as like a sort of quick taste of that, I've been running tests, and I keep them on this board over here, just to sort of keep track of what's doing what, how it's going, what the results are. I made an offer last week, 2 weeks ago, that some of you may have seen, where I said, hey, come make a map with me. It's this much money. And I was intending to aim for people who would eventually want to buy workshops, but just needed a taste of what it's like to work with me on a Wardley map. And spoiler alert, I got the wrong folks interested. It was folks who were going to pay for things out of pocket instead of using a corporate budget. It was folks who were dealing with individual problems as opposed to folks who were dealing with team level problems. So like I'm learning from that. And what I do is I actually work Sunday to Thursday each week, because it helps me like sort of have a quiet day where nobody's asking for anything. And Sunday is like really great for planning. And so part of what I'll do is test review and then plan the week based on what I learned from the tests that I ran in the last week. Another thing you might be aware of is there's an event coming up on this Tuesday. I only announced it like last Thursday, and that was sort of just a quick thing I was going to try. Turns out we had like 100 people register for that. Now, I did encourage people to register if they wanted the recording later. And there are like 2,000-ish people on the mailing list, like 2,400 or something like that. So, that's a function of like the large numbers on that list, people who might be interested in the recording. But we're going to run an event on Tuesday that's, maybe tomorrow what I'll do is I'll share a little bit of like what the planning is for that. We'll see. We're going to run an event which is basically just me articulating what I think, my opinion is of how, like what Wardley mapping is, what it's useful for, how to do it, things like that. And then just kind of leaving some space for conversation and questions and things like that. That's the plan. And we'll see how that goes. And I think, I'm also doing that because I will have a chance to pitch a different offer. And, I've been thinking about doing this thing where, I do like a Wardley map roast, let's be honest, I'm not going to roast anyone. That's not the point. It's more like a critique, but people don't like the word critique as much as roast. So that's kind of a weird marketing thing, positioning thing. But the idea would be that I would invite you to send me a map, and I would read it. And I would take the information that you give me in an intake form to make sense of it and to critique it and to share what sort of questions come up for me and things like that. So that's kind of like the idea that I'm thinking about. I might run a test around that and pitch the offer for that on this Tuesday event. So that's a little bit of like what's going on right now in the test world. I can share my test notebook and show you kind of like the prediction versus actual stuff. If you're interested in that, we can sort of explore that next. And I guess what I will say just to wrap this whole video up is if you want to follow along with that journey, if you're watching this video because you clicked on it from my mailing list, there's a button in that email to update your interests, to explicitly be interested in the things that I'm doing. So there's something there along the lines of like, Ben, like, are you interested in Wardley mapping, or are you just interested in like what Ben's doing, or both, right? So, if you want to see this video test this week, if you want to be notified when I push out videos, update your interests to be interested in me, Ben. And, if you're on YouTube and you want to follow along with this and get notified when it happens, just click the link to sign up in the description for the mailing list, and you'll get automatically added to the right interests and things like that. So that's what's coming up. Thank you for being with me on this weird journey. And it is exciting to kind of get back into this and answer questions as they come up, and share a little bit of what I'm up to. If you need any help with Wardley Maps, always feel free to email me, ben@higherthought.com. Or you can use the contact us form at learnwardleymapping.com. That is always going to work. It's always going to get to me. I'm always going to read it. So if you have any questions about Wardley Maps, that's a great way to get your questions answered. The other thing is, if you have a team that is struggling with a sticky problem, and you know that you need to be doing strategy-like things, even if you're not in a formal authority role where like you're responsible for strategy, but you are embarking on an effort that is difficult and has a lot of moving parts. You need a way to think together, or even on your own, and you'd like help with, say, like a miniature workshop just to kind of get some thinking done in this area, or if you want a full-blown like Wardley mapping, like what is it, how does it work, let's do it together kind of workshop, like half-day experience, I am also doing that. And of course, I have online courses and things like that. If you need to know where to find them, you can go to learnwardleymapping.com. But always feel welcome to contact me if you have any questions whatsoever. I will sometimes work those questions into this video thing that I'm doing now, and we'll see kind of where this goes. So yeah, this is a long video, but thank you for sticking with me. I appreciate you. Comments are always welcome. Hit reply, shoot back anything you want to do, or if you're on YouTube, just type in the comments. I'll read those too. I don't know how to stop this, how to end it, so I'm not going to. All right. Hope you have a great week. Take care. Bye.